Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Culiandra Nero. I'm a junior at Tufts University. My majors are child studies and human development and film and media studies. And this summer, I was a design fellow at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the name of my project was Productivity Classroom. Productivity Classroom is the name of the Productivity 101 webpage rebrand. Productivity 101 is an educational resource run by the Office of Productivity and Technology within the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The target audience for this webpage is high school students, and its goal was to teach them more about productivity and its important role in the economy. The Productivity 101 rebrand started with an expert review of the Productivity 101 webpage, which led to these key targets for the rebrand: the look and the feel of the user interface of the website, the structure of how the content was presented on the website, and the content itself. My work on the project mainly revolved around the content of the website. So what problem was I solving? The first pain point that was discovered in the expert review was that inconsistent design styles distracted from the text rather than supporting it. As you can see, the website had many different styles of clip art on it, often on the same page, and users found that this was very distracting. A second pain point was that there was not much graphic continuity connecting the Productivity 101 webpage to other related educational products. On the bottom right is an example of one of BLS's videos that helps explain several terms that are related to productivity. However, this series of videos has a very cohesive art style that is not carried over to the Productivity 101 webpage that often references and brings in direct examples from this video. A third pain point was that some of the examples used on the Productivity 101 webpage were not relatable to users. As you can see, this example from the page revolves around soybean farming, and reviewers found that we should try to find examples that would be more relatable to our high school audience. So my main objective on joining this project was to increase engagement with the new Productivity Classroom page by increasing the consistency and relatability of the visual content. My process began with research by doing a product analysis and reviewing user feedback. I then gave feedback and educational recommendations on what had been done on the project so far. After this, I started doing design iterations in Adobe Illustrator before doing revisions that focused on accessibility feedback and making sure I was keeping consistent branding. And the final step in my process will be the designer team handoffs, where I complete documentation and a walkthrough of my design files. One of the first things I worked on this project was the educational content. One thing my team liked about my background was that I'm currently getting a degree in child studies and human development and have experience working on lesson plans for several different age groups. As you can see on the bottom left, this product was originally organized through various storyboards and lesson plans. So one of my first goals was to use my background to make suggestions for flow and clarity. Some of the things I gave suggestions on were page labels, their specificity, and how it would help users navigate around the website. I gave suggestions on various educational strategies they could use to keep users engaged on the page. I also recommended they make a separate glossary page for this product, as there are many complicated terms and we didn't want users getting overwhelmed. And my final recommendations were regarding an extended universe and continuity across mediums. As I mentioned, BLS already has several video products that explores terms that are related to this project and introduce characters that are used throughout the Productivity 101 site. So further linking these two products would help explain more terms and keep users engaged with characters they're familiar with. Another major aspect that I had to keep in mind during this process was interpretation and what that meant for me. As mentioned, this project was originally organized through a storyboard, where then I had to then interpret that storyboard into real-world designs. To interpret these descriptions into graphics, it required that these would be very editable later. As several members of the team I'll be handing off to don't have a design experience, I wanted to make sure these designs were simple enough that they'd be able to go in and edit them for future projects. Another thing I had to keep in mind was time management, as there were several lessons worth of content I wanted to create designs for before my time here was up. On the bottom, I currently have an example of a bookkeeping icon I made for the project. As you can see here, there were several iterations of this icon, and as I incorporated feedback, it evolved. Some of the feedback I received overall during this project was regarding modernization, consistent branding, and accessibility. For this icon specifically, modernization was a big goal. As my team pointed out, bookkeeping most likely is going to take place online nowadays instead of with a pen and paper. The bulk of this project centered around creating a library of icons that could be used not only on the current lessons, but in future ones. The examples you see here are icons I made to be used in the lesson 1 designs and on future lessons. I continued to expand upon this library of designs by creating designs for the lesson 1 review section. The lesson 1 review section reviewed some of the more complicated topics discussed in lesson 1, and in return, I created some more complicated designs to go along with that to help users follow along. Next, I created some lesson 2 designs, again to add to the growing bank of icons from lesson 1 and to also be used in the future for future lessons. As I mentioned, one of the major goals for this project was expanding some consistent branding across the project. As you can see on the top left here, this is the current Productivity 101 logo. However, we found that this logo doesn't fit in with current BLS branding, nor did it fit in with the designs I had made for the project so far. So I worked on creating a new logo for the website. Over my time here, I created over 42 iterations of the design, trying to find one that would fit and encapsulate the whole site as well as future products. After incorporating feedback and making sure it fit current BLS branding, I came up with this design series, of which the designs will not only be used as a new logo for the productivity classroom product, but also to represent productivity throughout the various lessons. Another big part of this project was the character redesigns. As I've mentioned, cohesion is a major part of this project, and we wanted to make sure there were thick links between the videos BLS had already produced and this new product. So to support that, I redesigned some of the characters that were introduced in the videos so they could be used not only throughout the lessons, but in future videos and GIFs created by BLS. To further this, I also created new character designs for characters that can be used in the current lessons as well as future ones and videos. Along with this, I also created a new website banner. The goal of this banner was to introduce the new productivity classroom branding, as well as introduce the audience to some of the characters they'll grow familiar with throughout using BLS products. Another big part of this project was the productivity poster. As I've mentioned, we wanted to create an extended universe across mediums, and this poster is an additional product that will explore some of the concepts of the new productivity classroom site that included some designs there as well, which can be downloaded and used by teachers as well as shared at conferences. Productivity 101 was originally published in 2017. My work on this project in 2024 is only a small part of it. Going forward, this project will experience a user interface redesign as Productivity Classroom will get a whole new website outside of Productivity 101. Additional lessons will also be made for this project to make new content and new lessons to expand on what we've done already. And all the new content we've been working on here will get published to the web as well. And I wanted to say a special thank you to the BLS team, Coding It Forward, and my mentor. And thank you to all of you here today as well. And now we have time for questions, if anyone has any. If no one has any immediate questions, I can go in more depth about some of the designs I've done so far. Okay. Yeah. One part of this project I wanted to speak about more was the productivity poster here. As you can see, I included several iterations. Some of the design process here, in the beginning, I was just trying to take the different elements that were referred to me by my host office and kind of get them in a poster layout. After that, I began to think a lot more about how I wanted to present the information we wanted on the poster and how to help users look around the poster and how they should navigate it as well. On the left, we spent a lot of time thinking about how we wanted the poster broken up and how it could stay consistent with things we had discussed on Productivity Classroom. And as you can see, we also added more branding to the final poster, so it'd be easier for users who saw this in the wild to find the rest of the Productivity Classroom. And some elements of this I'd like to point out. As you can see, I started with various aspects here that started with the original Productivity 101 logo, including the clock and the gear. I've then kind of introduced the hammer here as we were thinking a lot about labor and its role in productivity. And eventually I started taking inspiration from that original BLS logo on the next slide and introduced the arrow. And then it was in the final steps of the design that we started to introduce the colors to keep consistent with the overall BLS brand. As I mentioned, this is like a series of designs that'll be used in several different ways. So we wanted to make sure that the design would be easily adaptable for several different purposes throughout the Productivity Classroom rebrand.
Hey, Culiandra, I had a question.
Yeah.
Were there any particular designs that you struggled with? Or I guess I'm curious, like how did you navigate that process of iteration?
I'd say one of the ones I struggled with the most was this logo design. As I mentioned, I counted like all the separate logos I had in my document, and there ended up being like 42. This is something I started in like my second week here at BLS, and it's something I only completed like last week. Um, as I mentioned, there were lots of different elements. Like as you can see here, there's like 4 very different versions, but there were a lot more than this. We wanted to make, like I mentioned, we wanted to make sure the logo could be used for like lots of different purposes. But we also had some feedback that I was struggling to work with. For example, we had one person recommend that we introduce like a more educational component to it, to kind of get like that classroom feel across. But as I was kind of reiterating, that's when we kind of came to the conclusion that it might be better to leave that aspect out and just end up leaving some room in the logo where we could add additional aspects so we can use them more throughout the lessons. But this is definitely the one I think I sat on the longest throughout the fellowship.
That's awesome. It's like nice to see all the different visual explorations and make all the iterations you did. I
Yeah.
also feel like you did a really good job of incorporating the feedback that you got from the team.
Mhm. Yeah, this is one I was very grateful to have help on.
Yeah,
I
and
can,
I
yeah.
will say as the sponsor and sort of like watching all of this, it wasn't for lack of trying. She gave us lots of options and we kept moving the goalpost on her. So this was a lesson in resilience as well. We learned a lot and we're going to reap the rewards for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those where I was like struggling to see where it was going. But when we finally got to the finish line, I was very happy with how it came out. And I think I was able to make something that'll be really helpful in future iterations of the classroom. It looks like we have 10 seconds left. So just another thank you for you all being here today. And I hope you enjoy these closing kind of ceremonies we'll be having here.